always. Job security is very important.
So, Colm, Colm, as I remember, you did philosophy once upon a time in Oxford as well. Long time ago. Let's move to Colm Chase, who is the author of a couple of books on artificial intelligence, amongst other things. One of them called The Economic Singularity, Artificial Intelligence and the Death of Capitalism, and another book called Surviving AI, The Promise and Peril of Artificial Intelligence. What do you see as the surprises ahead which will cause big changes of opinion?
I think the technology that we should keep an eye on and which will cause some serious surprises is self-driving vehicles. We already know about them. They're already available. You can get in a self-driving taxi now in Pittsburgh or in Singapore. And we know that they're going to be in production large scale by the turn of the decade. Self-driving cars is a bit of a clunky name, so let's call them autos. They're the product of our most powerful technology, artificial intelligence, which is the thing that's driving probably everything we'll speak about this evening. And autos will change almost everything about our lives. Some ways obvious, some ways not so obvious. The obvious is that they'll mean a lot fewer deaths. We currently kill about 1.2 million people around the world every year in road accidents. And we seriously injure another 20 to 50 million because we're sending humans to do a machine's job. And we'll stop doing that, so that's a good thing. Commuting will become a lot less painful. There'll be a lot less congestion. The use of space in cities will be greatly improved. So they'll have a huge impact on all those fronts. And they will seriously annoy Jeremy Clarkson, so that's a bonus. But there's another effect that self-driving vehicles will have, which I don't think people have twigged yet, which is that they're going to make professional drivers unemployed. At the moment, there's about 5 million professional drivers in the US and another 3 million people whose jobs directly depend on those people. There's about 1 million professional drivers in the UK. Somewhere in the mid-20s, those people are all going to be unemployed. It might take until 2030, but somewhere in that timescale, they're pretty much all going to be unemployed. And those people are doing blue-collar jobs that earn white-collar salaries. They're not going to get new jobs, or at least they're not going to get new jobs that they're happy with. They're going to be very gruntled people. At the same time, doctors, lawyers, all of you in this room, even writers like me, and certainly people working in factories and warehouses, are going to see artificial intelligence encroaching on their own jobs. And they're going to look at the drivers, and they're going to say, that's me in 2, 5, or 10 years' time. That's going to happen in 2025 or thereabouts. And those people, all of us, are going to start making major economic decisions. We don't currently know what they are. But for instance, just to throw an idea out, maybe all the doctors and the lawyers will think, I'm going to be unemployed in a few years' time. I'd better have some more cash on hand. I'm going to sell my house. And I'd better do it quickly before everybody else does it. But unfortunately, of course, everybody else is already going to be doing it. We may have the mother of all house price crashes in 2025. Now, that may well not happen, but some major things will start to happen because people will start to make important economic decisions based on what they see happening to drivers as a result of self-driving vehicles.
Thanks. So lots of points to dig into further, but before we do that, let's hear from the last, but not the least, member of the panel, George Osborne, Right Honourable George Osborne, who has been Chancellor of the Exchequer of 2010 to 2016. What's your view of the future, George?
Well, it's great. It's great to be here, and I'm going to pick up on the last point, which was made. Don't forget that there are human beings in all this behind these developments, and I'm a great technology optimist, and a lot of the technologies you're hearing about are incredibly exciting. They're going to improve living standards. They're going to make people healthier. They're going to make people live longer. They're going to improve the choices that are available to people. And so we should celebrate them, but remember that human beings, quite literally in many countries, have a vote. And some of these developments are going to pose really significant challenges to the way we organize our societies. And I don't think even in this room in the epicenter of Bloomberg, in the center of London, where we are generally enthusiastic about technological change, that human societies are going to be as welcoming of these changes as we might assume. I'll give you 2 examples from the last week. First, there was a court judgment in this country that said Uber now has to treat its employees as employees. In other words, they're not this brilliant app which the company invented, which was supposed to network together self-employed people, as the company saw it. Well, an employment tribunal in the United Kingdom has said, no, I'm afraid you employ those people. You owe them sickness pay, holiday pay, and so on. Now, the court judgment will be contested, but it's just a reminder that although you may want to order the world in a particular way, other people get a vote. Today, there has been a big government initiative on protecting the Internet of Things from hostile powers, whether they be teenagers in their room mucking around, or ISIS jihadists, or the Russian state that wants to exploit the free flow of information. So all of these developments essentially rely on open societies, liberal democracy, the free flow of information, and all of those things can be turned off. And at the moment, if you look around Western societies, the support for democracy is declining. The forces of protectionism are rising. The concern about the pace of globalization is growing. Technology is being used to echo back to people some of their prejudices rather than challenge them. So I just think before we assume that all this great technology, which I say I'm very excited about, is going to conquer the world, just remember that human beings have a vote.
And what do you see can be done to restore the good reputation of democracy and restore the liberal discussion rather than people panicking and taking foolish measures?
Well, I think essentially some of the ideas we've taken for granted in this country, in the United States, in Europe, around the fact that it's necessarily a good thing that you organize yourself as a democracy, it's necessarily a good thing that you have an open society, it's necessarily a good thing that you have free trade and the like. Those things have to be fought for. They were hard fought for by our ancestors, by our predecessors, and we are going to have to fight for them again. We have to start fighting now, I would argue, and not assume that they're just givens. And some of these issues, let's take the one that was just raised. You know, the idea that the medical profession or the legal profession is just going to accept that they're all unemployed because someone's invented a computer program. Well, in my experience of those two professions, highly, organized, very good at making their case in society, vocal, that is not going to be the case. Equally, we are going to, of course, have a challenge with the introduction of self-driving cars. But are we so certain that will create huge unemployment? Potentially it will open up new opportunities, new technology, new ways of organizing our society that might create jobs. So I just think we have to be, we have to go out and fight for the values we've rather taken for granted. And second, look for ways in which this technology can be used to benefit the lives of the maximum number of people, and that those people see it in that way. Because if you just assume, some sort of technology pessimists do, that essentially labor is going to become irrelevant and the holders of capital are going to become more powerful, just remember the votes lie with Labour. So that's going to be, to me, an interesting challenge over the next few years. And of course, you see those political developments already starting to play out in almost all Western societies at the moment.
Let's hear from the panel whether they think that these new technologies are going to create new jobs or not. So, Callum, what's your view as to the previous industrial revolutions have displaced people from the workforce, but have also created all manner of new jobs? Sure. Isn't that likely to happen this time round as well?
It's absolutely true that in all previous rounds of automation, more new jobs have been created in the long term than have been destroyed. The transition was deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people, but it did not create lasting unemployment. The question is it different this time? And I think it is for a simple reason. Previous rounds of automation have mechanized our muscle power. Machines have taken out almost all of the labor in agriculture. It used to employ about 40% of American workers. Now it employs less than 2%. what's happening, and that was fine for the humans because the humans went on to do other jobs in factories or in offices, many of which were safer and more interesting. It didn't work out terribly well for the horse, which only had muscle power to offer. And so there were 25 million horses working on farms in America in 1900, and now there are pretty much none. From now on, automation is going to replace our cognitive abilities. Now, I do think that this can be a very good thing, and I think we have to work to make sure it's a very good thing, because I think we could end up in a world which is largely post-jobs. Not everybody is going to be unemployed, but a great many people are going to be unemployable. But if we manage the transition well, we live in a post-jobs world where machines do all the boring stuff, and humans get on with the important business of life, which is playing and learning and exploring and having fun. That's a great world. But I don't think that it will happen automatically, or it may well not happen automatically. Maybe it won't happen at all. Maybe George is right. Maybe doctors and lawyers will manage to fend off the machines, and they'll kind of retreat up the value chain and do more value-added jobs, and more jobs will be created. I doubt that, because I think the machines will creep up the value chain after us pretty fast. So I think we need to manage this transition, and we're going to need to start making plans and working out scenarios pretty soon, because I think the foreshocks of it are going to happen quite soon.
Ollie, when you work
societies and the liberal democracies that I happen to think are the best way of organizing societies. Well, I think it just requires a collective effort. I mean, it was commonplace when I was a child because we faced a very clear external threat from Soviet communism, and a huge effort was put into making the case for a particular way of life and a particular way of organizing our society. We rather gave up because we thought those ideas had conquered the world, but actually they're being rolled back a little. And I'll give you just it may seem a very boring and sort of anodyne example, but it's I thought, a good one. A free trade deal has been done between Europe and Canada. I suspect everyone in this room who follows the news will know that a small Belgian province blocked it, right? Well, it blocked it for a couple of days, and then they stopped blocking it, and it's been signed. How many people in this room can tell me what the benefits of that free trade deal are with Canada? In other words, we didn't go out and sell the advantages of free trade. So we shouldn't be surprised if we're not making an effort, those of us who believe in free trade, that those who argue against free trade or more protectionism are out there in that vacuum we've created. And it's I wouldn't say it's straightforward, but the basic idea is get out there and fight for things you currently take for granted.
And who will be doing that?
Well, me for a start.
Any other comments on any of these points?
I'd like to take up your shock point. I think humans are pretty good at reacting to shocks. We did a pretty good job at dealing with the hole in the ozone layer. And in the AI area, which is what most interests me, a couple of years ago, we had the three wise men moment when Stephen Hawking started it off writing an article in the Huffington Post, of all places, which I think is probably written mostly by Professor Stuart Russell, who had read Anders' colleague Nick Bostrom's book. And what Hawking said was that artificial general intelligence is coming soon, probably, and it's either going to be the best thing or the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And that was repeated by Elon Musk and then Bill Gates, and everybody woke up to the possibility of superintelligence. For a couple of years, the papers were absolutely full of pictures of the Terminator, which really, really annoyed Google, so now Google doesn't talk about AI in public anymore. Pity, but that will change. So we had the shock. We had the three wise men moment about superintelligence. I think we now need the three wise men, or let's make it three wise women, moment on the economic disruption that we're about to have. It probably isn't an existential risk, so it won't interest Anders as much, because it probably won't kill us, like superintelligence could if it went wrong. But it might throw us back to the Middle Ages or the Stone Age if we get it wrong. And we really, really shouldn't get it wrong.
Is that not a big enough risk for you?
No, doesn't interest him. No. As they say, 99% of humans wiped out is okay. It's the last 1% that's really important. And technological unemployment won't kill us all, probably. It'll quite possibly make us all a lot poorer if we get it wrong. So let's not get it wrong. Let's get it right. And I totally agree with George that the open society and free trade is the way forward. Unfortunately, collectively, we've failed to sell it. And so Britain's voted against it. America hopefully isn't going to vote against it. We need to keep that. We also need to deal with this enormous disruption if we get technological unemployment. It isn't a surefire guaranteed thing, but it seems plausible. And at the moment, the big problem we have is that all the economists are saying, no, it can't happen. It's the Luddite fallacy. You're forgetting about the law of comparative advantage. You're guilty of the sort of lump of labor fallacy. And so the politicians, many of whom actually are thinking about this, William Hague wrote an interesting article about it, Kenneth Baker, who I'm old enough to remember as an education secretary, thinks about it a lot. I bet George thinks about it. We need to give these guys license to talk about it publicly. I think we may need a shock to make that happen.
So, George, I understand you need to leave reasonably soon.
Collectively to solve these problems, but I very much agree with what's been said that we should start the conversation on things like artificial intelligence, and it is happening. The fact politicians are taking part in these debates is a reflection that society is also taking part in this debate, and that's a good thing.